On my birthday, my parents told me to pay off my brother's $95,000 debt, and that was the moment I realized I was nothing more than their backup wallet. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Lisa. I'm 29, and I've worked hard for everything I have. I've always been the responsible one in my family. My brother Cale was the golden child, the one my parents praised even when he messed up. I never complained, even when they overlooked my achievements. I thought that being quiet and supportive would keep the peace. On my birthday, I walked into the family dinner expecting a simple celebration. Instead, my parents slid a folder toward me. Inside were papers showing Cale's $95,000 debt from failed business ideas and unpaid credit cards. They didn't ask, they told me I needed to pay it. They said I was the only stable one and that family should help each other. But I could see in their eyes that this wasn't a sudden request. They had already promised Cale I would bail him out. Cale didn't even look embarrassed. He sat there with a smug grin, acting like this was normal. Something inside me broke. I finally told them no. The room froze. My parents called me selfish, cold, and ungrateful. Cale stormed out, blaming me for his problems. For the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't family, I was a safety net they expected to use whenever they wanted. And in that moment, I knew things would never be the same again. Lisa walked into the restaurant expecting a warm birthday dinner, maybe a small cake and a few kind words. Instead, she noticed right away that something felt wrong. Her parents, Marvin and Alora, didn't smile or wish her a happy birthday. They sat stiffly, barely looking at her, as if they were preparing for something heavy. Before Lisa could even take off her coat, Marvin pushed a plain folder across the table toward her. No explanation, no greeting. Just a cold gesture that made her stomach tighten. She opened it slowly, confused and already uneasy. Inside were pages showing huge numbers, lists of overdue charges, and warnings from lenders. The total was written in bold, $95,000. She blinked, thinking it had to be some mistake. But Marvin spoke in a calm, almost practiced voice. He explained that Cale had once again taken risks that didn't work out, business ideas he never researched, cards he kept maxing out, bills he ignored. Alora nodded, adding that things had become unmanageable. Lisa's heart dropped. She kept reading the pages, each one worse than the last. Her parents watched her like they were waiting for her to agree before she even understood what was happening. Then Alora said it directly, like it was the most natural thing in the world, Lisa needed to take care of it. She needed to step up, because she was the reliable one, the one who could fix what Cale broke. There was no apology, no explanation for why they were handing this to her on her birthday. Just an expectation that she would solve a crisis she didn't create. In that moment, the celebration she thought she was walking into vanished, replaced by a cold demand she never saw coming. Lisa sat there trying to process the demand when something in the room shifted. Cale finally wandered in, not looking worried or ashamed. He dropped into his seat with a lazy grin, as if the evening was already going his way. That expression alone told her there was more she hadn't been told. Alora casually mentioned that Cale had been waiting for her decision, saying it like everyone already knew what was supposed to happen. Marvin added that they had assured him everything would be handled soon. The words felt sharp, almost rehearsed. Lisa's pulse quickened as the truth formed in her mind. This wasn't a situation they hoped she might help with, this was something they had already promised on her behalf. Cale leaned back, tapping his fingers on the table, acting like he was owed relief. He didn't thank her or even ask her. Instead, he spoke about how he could finally move forward once the debt disappeared, calling it his clean slate. His tone carried confidence, almost arrogance, as if her involvement was already guaranteed. That was the moment the betrayal became clear. They had made arrangements without speaking to her, built a solution that depended entirely on her effort and money, then expected her to simply accept it. She realized she wasn't being approached as a loved one, they were treating her like a resource they could draw from whenever they chose. It wasn't a sudden crisis dropped on the table. It was a plan crafted quietly, with decisions made in rooms she wasn't invited into. They had turned her into the answer before she even knew there was a question. And seeing Kale sit there, already benefiting from promises she never made the truth sting even deeper. Lisa felt the pressure building around her, but this time something inside her refused to bend. She closed the folder, slid it back across the table, and said a quiet but steady no. It wasn't raised, it wasn't emotional, just final. The air seemed to freeze. Marvin stared at her as if he couldn't believe she'd spoken. Alora's jaw tightened, and Kale's smug expression dropped instantly. Lisa met each of their eyes and explained that she wasn't responsible for choices she never made. She pointed out that the numbers belonged to Kale, that he signed the papers, that he made every decision on those pages. She wasn't going to fix problems created by someone who expected others to carry the weight for him. She didn't apologize, didn't soften her voice. She simply refused to shoulder something that wasn't hers. The reaction was immediate and loud. Marvin pushed his chair back so hard it scraped across the floor. He accused her of turning her back on her own flesh and blood. Alora leaned forward, eyes filled with anger, calling her cold-hearted and selfish for not stepping in. They acted as if she had betrayed them, not the other way around. Kale stood up, pacing in frustration. His voice rose, cracking with outrage as he insisted she was supposed to fix everything. When she didn't waver, he pointed at her, claiming she had just destroyed his future. He muttered bitterly that she had ruined his life, then stormed out of the restaurant without looking back. Their reaction didn't change her decision. For the first time, she protected herself instead of trying to keep everyone else comfortable. Even as their accusations hit her from both sides, she stayed still, holding her ground. She wasn't going to be pulled into chaos she didn't create, and watching their shock only confirmed she had done the right thing. The days following the dinner felt heavier than Lisa expected. Her phone rang constantly, each call carrying the same message dressed in different words. Marvin insisted she rethink everything, reminding her of moments from childhood as if those memories were debts she now had to repay. Alora used softer tones at first, saying that families support each other during difficult moments, then shifting to sharper comments when Lisa didn't give in. The pattern was clear, they weren't trying to understand her. They were trying to wear her down. Messages came early in the morning and late at night. Some were long explanations about responsibility, others were short, guilt-filled reminders that Kale was struggling because of her refusal. They kept pushing the idea that she was the only one who could fix things. They didn't ask how she felt or why she made the choice. They simply refused to accept it. Instead of pulling her closer, their pressure created distance. Lisa realized how often she had absorbed these emotional tactics without noticing. She had always been the one who adjusted, who stayed quiet, who covered what others ignored. Now she saw the pattern clearly, and it strengthened her resolve. Each time another call or message came in, she stepped a little further back in her mind. She started creating space that she had never allowed herself before. She no longer felt the automatic urge to fix everything. She let their words pass through her without taking root. The more they pushed, the more certain she became that she couldn't continue living the way she had. By the end of the week, she knew she needed a true shift. She wasn't just refusing the debt, she was refusing the role they kept trying to force on her. And for the first time in her life, she felt the beginnings of emotional freedom. A few days later, Lisa ran into Nora, an old family friend who had known her parents for years. Nora asked gently if things were all right, saying she had overheard Marvin discussing another difficult situation with Kale. Lisa didn't share details, but her quiet expression must have said enough. Nora hesitated, then mentioned something Lisa wasn't prepared for. Years earlier, when Lisa had given her parents a large sum to put aside for her future place, she believed it was untouched, waiting for the right moment. Nora revealed that the money hadn't stayed in any account. It had been used quickly, and not for anything related to Lisa. Marvin had complained at the time about one of Kale's past crises, and how that contribution had solved it. Nora assumed Lisa already knew. Lisa felt the ground shift beneath her. She didn't interrupt. She just listened as Nora explained in a tired voice how her parents had always tried to rescue Kale, even when it meant sacrificing something that belonged to someone else. Nora didn't speak with judgment, just concern. She mentioned how relieved Marvin had been when they found a way out during that previous problem. Lisa kept her reaction inside until the conversation ended. When she walked away, her thoughts circled around the truth she had never suspected. That money had been meant for her first home, the dream she had saved for slowly. She had trusted her parents completely with it. They had never told her what they did with it. She had never questioned them. The realization settled painfully. This wasn't a new situation, it was a repeated pattern. They had chosen Kale's comfort over her plans once before, and they had done it without hesitation. She understood now that the latest demand wasn't a sudden misjudgment. It was simply the next step in a long line of decisions where she was the one expected to sacrifice. Lisa was spending a quiet evening at home when a hard knock echoed through her apartment. The sound startled her, she hadn't told anyone she was free. When she opened the door, her parents were standing there, tense and impatient. Before she could speak, they pushed inside as if the space still belonged to them. Marvin's face was set, and Alora clutched her purse tightly, her expression heavy with disappointment. They didn't ask to sit, they launched right in. Marvin began lecturing her about duty and blood ties, saying no family member should ever refuse to help another. Alora joined in, her voice sharp with frustration, claiming Lisa had forgotten everything they'd done for her. "You wouldn't have anything if it weren't for us," she said bitterly. "After all we gave you, you owe us this much." Lisa felt her chest tighten. Their words weren't new, but hearing them inside her own home made it worse. She noticed movement outside through the window, Kale leaning against a car, scrolling on his phone, wearing a brand new jacket that gleamed under the streetlight. The image twisted her stomach. He didn't look like someone drowning in debt. He looked comfortable, waiting for them to finish convincing her. The pressure in the room grew heavier with every sentence. Marvin repeated that family debts belonged to everyone, that they all shared the same burden. Alora nodded, calling it a small sacrifice for peace. Lisa stood still, listening until the noise blurred into a single ache. Then something inside her cracked. Her voice came out firm, clear, and final. She told them to leave. The years of guilt and quiet obedience burned away in that moment. She didn't raise her voice, she simply refused to let them control her anymore. The door closing behind them felt like the first breath of freedom she'd taken in years. Lisa knew she couldn't keep living under the same pressure, so she sat down at her table one quiet morning and began writing. The letter wasn't angry. It was steady, clear, and honest. She explained that she needed distance, that she wouldn't carry responsibilities that weren't hers, and that she was protecting her own well-being for the first time. She laid out her boundaries in simple terms, telling them she wasn't shutting them out forever, but she was stepping back until they respected her as an individual, not a solution. When she finished, she folded the pages carefully and mailed them. There was nothing more to say in person. She didn't want another argument, another attempt to convince her she was wrong for wanting peace. After sending the letter, she blocked their calls and messages. Not out of anger, but out of necessity. Every time the phone lit up with their names, she felt the old weight pulling her down. Blocking them was the only way to breathe without fear of being dragged back into the same cycle. Around the same time, a work opportunity opened up in another state, an advancement she had been considering but never fully pursued. Now it felt like the right moment. She found a small rental home close to her new office, packed carefully, and moved without announcing anything to her family. The drive was long, but with each mile, the tension in her chest eased a little more. The first night in the new place was quiet. No knocking on the door, no buzzing phone, no pressure pressing against her thoughts. It hurt to create such distance, but the silence felt healing. For the first time in her life, she wasn't responsible for anyone else's mistakes. She belonged to herself, and that truth settled around her like a soft, steady calm. It didn't take long for the ripple to reach people she hadn't spoken to in months. Her new phone number stayed quiet until one afternoon when messages began stacking up from cousins, an aunt, even someone she barely remembered from childhood gatherings. Each note carried the same tone, surprise mixed with judgment. They said her parents were devastated, that she had walked away without reason, that she had left them to struggle alone. The wording was so similar it was obvious where the story came from. Some wrote long paragraphs urging her to fix things, while others sent short, guilt-tinged lines about family loyalty. One message said her parents had been crying over her sudden disappearance, painting her as someone who ran away without explanation. No one asked her side. No one wondered if there was more beneath the surface. They accepted every word told to them, because that version made her parents look helpless and made Lisa look heartless. She read each message once, then set her phone down. Responding would only drag her back into a place she had fought so hard to step away from. She wasn't interested in arguments or explanations that would fall on ears already closed. Silence became her shield. Even when relatives accused her of being cold or distant, she refused to let those comments reopen old wounds. Still, when the evenings grew quiet, a soft ache sometimes crept in. Years of conditioning didn't disappear overnight. A part of her still felt the tug of responsibility, the old instinct to make everyone else comfortable. But she reminded herself why she had left. She wanted a life that wasn't built around fixing other people's choices. She focused on settling into her new routine, decorating her small place, exploring her neighborhood, and allowing peace to take root. Every day she held on to the choice she made, with steady, quiet determination. Months passed, and the news reached Lisa in small, fragmented pieces. Cale was struggling more than she had imagined. Letters piled up from collectors, warning about overdue payments and repossessed accounts. One day, she heard from a neighbor that movers had shown up at his apartment to reclaim furniture, leaving empty rooms behind. He had no savings left, and the luxury he had flaunted during her parents' visit had vanished. Despite everything, Cale refused to take responsibility. When anyone asked about his situation, he painted Lisa as the villain, claiming she had abandoned him when he needed her most. He told stories of how her refusal had ruined his life, exaggerating details, hoping to shift guilt away from himself. Even casual acquaintances repeated parts of his version without questioning the facts. Her parents, predictably, seized the opportunity to further criticize her. Marvin called her heartless, Alora said she had no sense of family duty, and both suggested she should have stepped in regardless of past betrayals. They reinforced the idea that she had left Cale to suffer, as if her decision to protect herself had no justification. But Lisa felt no guilt this time. She had seen the pattern clearly for years. Cale had always been favored, shielded from the consequences of his choices, while she was expected to absorb the fallout. For nearly 3 decades, her parents' decisions had placed him above her at every turn. Watching the chaos unfold without her involvement was painful, yet freeing. She didn't need to fix it or explain herself. Cale's downfall was the result of his actions and the system her parents had long maintained. She simply observed, quietly assured that she had finally stepped out of the cycle, keeping her boundaries and her peace intact. In her new city, Lisa slowly began to feel life settle into a rhythm that was entirely hers. Work, which had once been a means to survive, became a space where she thrived. Her dedication and insight were noticed, and within months she received a leadership bonus, recognition she had long deserved but never fully experienced at home. The validation felt different this time. It was earned on her terms, not handed out to make someone else comfortable. Alongside her career growth, she started attending therapy. At first, it was hard to untangle the years of expectation and guilt embedded in her thoughts. She learned how deeply her family's favoritism had shaped her sense of worth, how she had internalized the idea that her value depended on sacrificing for others. Slowly, session by session, she began to unpack those layers, learning to recognize her own needs and emotions without shame. Outside of work, Lisa cultivated routines that strengthened her independence. She decorated her apartment to reflect her taste, spent weekends exploring local cafes and parks, and connected with people who respected her boundaries. She practiced saying no without anxiety and felt the weight of obligation lift incrementally. With each passing day, she felt more grounded. The life she was building was deliberate, not dictated by anyone else's expectations. Every success, every small victory, reminded her that she could thrive without sacrificing herself. Lisa's rise wasn't just professional, it was personal, emotional, and quiet, a steady reclaiming of herself after years of being sidelined. For the first time, she felt truly capable of living for herself, not for anyone else's comfort or approval. One afternoon, months after she had moved and settled into her routine, Lisa's father showed up at her office. The sight of him felt jarring, out of place amid the hum of her busy workplace. He looked uneasy but determined, as if rehearsing lines he hoped would change everything. "I just want things back the way they were," he said, his voice steady but lacking the conviction that might have convinced her. He spoke as though restoring the old order was the most important thing, ignoring the years of tension, manipulation, and broken trust that had led to her distance. Lisa listened quietly, keeping her posture calm. When she asked whether they truly understood the pain they had caused, whether they recognized the damage of prioritizing Kale over her, both Marvin and Alora hesitated. Their eyes flicked to one another, then away, silent in the face of a question that required more than shallow words. She waited, letting the silence stretch. It said more than any apology could. They had come hoping she would return to old patterns, but the courage and clarity she had gained over the past months created a wall no words could breach. Without another response, Lisa turned and walked back to her office, leaving her father standing there, unprepared for the strength she now carried. Every step she took felt lighter than the last. She had already reclaimed her life, and nothing he said, or didn't say, could take that away. In that moment, she felt a calm certainty. She no longer needed their approval or forgiveness to live fully, and she would not allow herself to be drawn back into the old chaos. Lisa spent an afternoon reviewing her personal affairs, thinking about every step she could take to ensure her independence. She updated her will, carefully removing her family from any roles that would give them control or access. Emergency contacts were changed, accounts adjusted, and every detail handled so there could be no misunderstanding. Along with these changes, she drafted a concise note explaining her choices, not in anger, but with clarity. She detailed why she had taken these steps, documenting the years of being used and overlooked, and why she would no longer allow herself to be their fallback. It wasn't about revenge in the dramatic sense. There were no confrontations or declarations meant to shame them. Instead, it was quiet, deliberate, and complete. Each decision reinforced her autonomy. Lisa felt a sense of satisfaction unlike any she had known before. Her freedom was her message. For years, she had absorbed stress, guilt, and manipulation from the people who claimed to love her. Now, she had reclaimed every piece of her life they had tried to control. The note, the legal adjustments, and the removal of her family from her inner circle were all part of a boundary that could not be crossed. In the silence of her apartment, she realized the true weight of her actions. She had built a fortress around her own peace, a sanctuary no one could breach. Her revenge wasn't public or vindictive, it was personal, a reclamation of self-respect and dignity. For the first time, she could live without fear, without expectation, and without compromise. That quiet triumph, unseen by anyone else, was the most powerful statement she could make. When her next birthday arrived, Lisa approached it differently than any before. There were no calls from relatives, no last-minute demands, no shadow of debt hanging over her. She bought a small cake, simple but meaningful, and lit a single candle. Sitting at her kitchen table, she allowed herself to savor the quiet. The room felt light in a way she hadn't experienced in years, free from the weight of expectation and manipulation. She reflected on how far she had come, moving away, building a career, setting boundaries, and finally reclaiming her life. The thought of the past still lingered, but instead of pain, it brought a steady clarity. She had survived the pressure, the betrayal, and the endless requests, and had emerged stronger, more certain of her own worth. As she took a small bite of cake, she silently promised herself that she would never allow anyone to drain her again. Not her parents, not Kale, and not the extended family who had blindly sided with their version of events. She realized that the freedom she had fought for was her true victory. Lisa spent the day indulging in small joys she had neglected for years, reading a book she loved, sipping tea by the window, and taking a long walk through her neighborhood. Every moment reminded her that she was in control now, that her choices mattered, and that her life belonged entirely to her. Her revenge had been quiet, but it was complete. She wasn't seeking punishment or validation from anyone else. By living fully, embracing her independence, and protecting her peace, she had achieved something no argument or confrontation could provide. Lisa's closure was not about them, it was about her, and for the first time, she felt truly free.